I really don't know where America has always been as fascist as it needs to be. You know, I, 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 I mean, I just don't know what America y'all been living in. The people who say that, not you, Carl. But what America have you not been living in? What more did what's going to happen in the United States under Trump re-election that hasn't already happened? Surveillance of the citizens, assassinations of leaders, incarceration, framing, and false incarceration of political prisoners, genocidal repression of minorities such as Native Americans or African people. Trump, the only thing different is Trump's style and rhetoric. Now, that's not the only thing different. There are some other differences. But in terms of fascism, in terms of corporatism, reallocation, destruction, and erosion of workers' movements, like what the fuck could happen under Trump that hasn't happened already? Even allowing diseases to ravage communities. Before the pandemic of COVID-19, we were under an epidemic of type 2 diabetes. Climate change? I don't know. I mean, maybe y'all know better than me. Maybe y'all follow this shit better than I do. But I have yet to see anything. Now, there are some differences between Democrats and Republicans. And I always say, y'all always see when people are, ain't no difference. There is a difference. Especially on the local scale, I'm definitely happier. I think it's better that we have, like in Illinois, a Democratic governor put a moratorium on executions. And then when we got a Republican governor, he wanted to reinstitute executing prisoners on death row. And now we have another Democrat, there's a moratorium. So we can walk the streets, be like, yeah, it don't matter. But to our brothers and sisters who are on death row, our brothers and sisters who are falsely incarcerated or unjustly incarcerated and their extended family, there's literally thousands of Black people whose lives will be more positively affected with a Democrat in the governorship than a Republican. I would prefer to have in those situations. So there are legislative policies, priority differences between the two parties, especially when you come down to the state level. Even if you're filing for bankruptcy in Missouri, they will take everything and make you destitute and make it almost impossible to file for bankruptcy in a red state. In a blue state, it's easier and you can retain some of your assets. And I know those things ain't liberation. Neither party will liberate us. But there are certain areas and certain levels where it's rational to vote Democrat than Republican. In some areas. In other areas, it's all but irrelevant because both parties support the militaristic empire. Both parties support Zionism. Both parties support the recolonization of the African continent. Both parties support the fucking police. So there are some differences. And so I'm not going to sit here because I'm not vulnerable or I don't have certain hardships that other people are facing and condemn them for voting Democrat when it's in their interest. I support, if you can tell me, listen, I'm voting for a Democratic alderman. I'm voting for a Democratic mayor. I'm voting for a Democratic governor, a Democratic fucking dog catcher. If you can say, listen, my local Democratic Party, it takes this position where the Republican, I'm not going to argue with you. But I'd like for you to sit and tell me how voting for Biden versus Trump on a national level. Some people will argue the Supreme Court. It's a valid argument. I'm willing to have that debate. But so I'm not saying, and even, what's his name? James Baldwin says sometimes when Black people enter the election, they're not really voting for one politician or the other. They're just voting for time. They're voting for breathing space, and that's a good argument. So I don't even know if I'm still answering your question. So fearing fascism, if you're afraid of fascism, I don't know where the fuck you've been. I don't know what country you've been living in. I don't know how old you are. Maybe if you just 15 and you've been suckling at your mother's breast for the last years and she's really sheltered you. But I don't know what in terms of totalitarian fascist, the United States government, since its founding, has demonstrated that it's willing to do anything up into and including violate its own constitution, violate the rights of citizens and the inalienable rights of citizens, commit acts of atrocity, genocide, in order to maintain the status quo. There is absolutely nothing the government won't do to sustain the status quo. But on one side, it's willing to commit atrocities, but on other sides, it's willing to make other concessions, like allow black folks to sit on the front of the bus, sit at lunch counters, and attend some of their elite universities, or integrate the Major League Baseball. They're like, yeah, we'll let black folks do that, but that doesn't affect the status quo. None of those things change the status quo. When you start to advocate for things that change the status quo, there's nothing the government won't do. So this government is lawless. It is fascist. And Trump is crazy, scary. I hate Trump. I would never vote for Trump. But I've yet to have a rational argument of how fascism will be averted, or fascism will not be present under Biden. And can you even tell me what things you identify as fascist that weren't present under Obama? In fact, Obama's a more effective fascist than Trump was, because the kind of fascism that can have you cozy at home, sitting with your family, singing Christian hymns, the kind of fascism that can have you going to work and thinking it's all good, is some fucking deadly, sinister fascism. Versus the fascism that got you like, oh God, I'm living in a fascist country. That's bad. That's amateur fascism. You know, there's a big difference between the pimp that can manipulate the woman and have the woman eagerly and happily walk in the stroll, versus the pimp that has to drag the woman out and kick her and beat her to get her to walk the stroll. Guerrilla pimping. So y'all tell me, I don't see. Oh, and I was going to say this. Trump is currently being faced with several social movements, some right-wing, some centrist, some leftist movements. Everything from neo-Nazis to Antifa are in the streets right now. Trump doesn't know what the fuck to do. And every time he says or does something, all of those movements go stronger. Obama systematically dismantled the largest social justice movement to the point where we don't even fucking remember the movement happened. Obama utterly destroyed the largest social justice movement that had emerged in the United States since the 1960s. Since the 1960s, the Occupy movement. You had Occupy movements from Oakland, California to Manhattan, Wall Street and Manhattan. There were socialists. There were anarchists. There were even progressives out there making demands. The 1%. They were calling for economic reform, social justice. That was the biggest movement. And it was a trans-political movement and a trans-racial movement, meaning people from across the political spectrum and people from all sorts of racial, cultural, ethnic groups were all in these encampments. And Obama illegally coordinated between the federal policing and intelligence agents, illegal spying, illegal doxing of activists, and coordinated with local policing to subvert those encampments and drive those people away. Trump is trying to overthrow one encampment in Portland, Oregon, and he can't even overthrow that one encampment. Obama destroyed literally hundreds of encampments across the nation without a fucking peep. That's cold fucking blooded. Nobody called it fascist. Obama put kids, separated families. Obama militarized the border. Obama was the first president to have drones flying across the border, high-tech surveillance and stop tactics. Under Obama, thousands of migrants who had safe paths to come into the United States had to take the more dangerous route through the open desert and the mountainous terrain in order to get into the country, and their corpses lie there, backpacks on skeletons, and nobody say shit. And nobody saw fascism until Trump's dumbass. Trump is a stupid fascist. So if you're afraid of stupid fascism, then you should definitely be afraid of Trump. But if you like intelligent, articulate, smooth, calming, reassuring fascism, then vote for fucking Biden. I'm not voting for neither one of them, motherfuck that shit. So, do I agree that fascism will become further entrenched? I don't know how it could get more entrenched. America is as fascist as it needs to be. In fact, you know who determines how fascist the United States will be? We do, the citizens. If the citizens are docile and we do what the government tells us, the government doesn't have to be fascist. The moment the working class, the citizens, oppressed groups like black folks, Native Americans, moment people start to mobilize to threaten the status quo, America goes full on fascism, full on surveillance, full on COINTELPRO. Trump was snorting coke off his daughter's naked behind back when COINTELPRO was going on. He wasn't. I mean, even was his daughter even born? Trump was snorting coke and complaining about having bone spurs when COINTELPRO was going on, lying about bone spurs. He wasn't even a part of the government when one of the most fascistic government conspiracies was executed against black folks. Trump wasn't even a political figure back then. He hadn't even appeared on Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous yet. So no, I don't think Trump is the cause of fascism. I think Trump is dangerous because he's stupid. But I don't think he's going to further entrench anything. Trump ain't nothing new under Trump, except people's heightened awareness of shit.